We have very different conditions. Borussia Dortmund must overperform, Bayern must underperform, and if both deliver normally, Bayern will be champions for the 12th time. Whether people like to hear it or not, that's a fact. Borussia Dortmund CEO Hans-Joachim Watzke said this in 2023, a week after Dortmund came second in the Bundesliga, even though they went into the final day 2 points on top. There is truth to his statement. The clubs have different working conditions, but for the head of an organization to publicly state this about a situation that was actually completely in their control, that is a problem, and it's systemic. Borussia Dortmund have an insanely passionate fan base, the second most members of any German club, the biggest stadium in the league, 81,000 tickets sold out instantly every week. And I strongly believe that they're a team that many non-Germans have chosen to support simply due to the fact that they've been viewed as the underdog over the last 20 or so years. But they are in fact not a small underdog minnow of a club. Sadly, statements like the one Watzke made prove that the club's managing staff view themselves as such. With an annual revenue of 420 million euros for the 2022-23 season, they were the 12th highest revenue generating club in all of Europe. The 23-24 results saw an increase from that figure to 510 million, a figure that put them just shy of the top 10, but still over 100 million euros above 12th place Atletico Madrid. The uptick in revenue is due to them making a Champions League final. Fluke or not, this is a club that is expected to compete for gold, not silver. Look at the clubs in the top 15 here. Real Madrid, Man City, Arsenal, Bayern Munich. Barcelona, Liverpool, Milan, they may not have Bayern money and certainly can't afford 20 million euro salaries, but lately it seems like they've simply given up the pursuit of innovating like they have before. Leverkusen's 23-24 season was generational. You can't expect that to be replicated. But Stuttgart's wasn't. And they finished above Bayern. You could argue that Bayern underperformed, they did, but what's Dortmund's excuse? They've been in regression for a while. The problems are aplenty. There has been infighting on the board level, with people going after each other's jobs. There's clearly been some missteps in decision making. Players are not making an effort. Fans are having strong words with them. 6 head coaches in 8 years. Soon, that will be 7. At the time of recording, no wins in 2025 at all. 3 back-to-back-to-back defeats in domestic competitions in the space of 7 days. A loss to Bologna in the Champions League after they led but conceded twice in 2 minutes. Then a draw to Werder Bremen at home after being 2 goals up. Forget being happy with being second. Right now, they have to settle for 10th. Who's to blame? As per this banner on display at the Bremen game, days after the sacking of Nuri Sahin, it's obvious. Address the elephant in the room. The problems are not on the sidelines. What we're going to do in this video is understand where things went wrong and why fans have grown to be wary of whether the leadership has their best interests at heart. Hello, hope you're well, subscribe. 2 decades ago, Borussia Dortmund was a club in the red. When they got themselves out of it, they committed to going all in on young talent to reduce costs. Their eye for said talent bagged them youth players that larger clubs weren't willing to take a chance on. Dortmund then turned them into household names and 5 to 10x their value. Eventually, young players that those bigger clubs were willing to take a chance on preferred to go to Dortmund instead. Haaland and Bellingham both could have gotten significantly more money elsewhere, but Dortmund was where they chose to incubate. Unfortunately, this strategy was a double-edged sword. It came with a lot of good, but also a lot of bad. Yes, you'd bring these players in and they would become integral members of the team. That's good. But then they would end up leaving the club when they're at their most important for the team. That's bad. But that money that was brought in was then used to fuel the future growth for the club. That's good. Losing your best players is something every team has to deal with, especially when you're Dortmund. Their business plan actually depends on it. Strategic reinvestment, consistent recruitment, and cohesion at the top usually ensures that things don't go awry. However, lately, none of those things have been consistent and, well, things are going awry. So where do we start? It would be easy to look to the team and the coach, but that's not the genesis of this situation. We have to go a step above. In fact, we have to go to the very top. Hans-Joachim Watzke, the longtime CEO of Borussia Dortmund. He joined the club in 2001 after a career in business where he started his own wildly successful personal protection gear company. He was put in charge of handling everything financial, something that turned out to be a masterstroke. When he joined the club, but more so a few years on, Dortmund experienced a massive financial crisis due to unsustainable spending by those in charge. They were very successful in the late 90s and early 2000s, but mind my French, pissed it all away, spending money they didn't have. Both Uli Hoeneß and Watzke have confirmed that Bayern Munich even gave Dortmund an interest-free loan of 2 million euros around 2003. Reminder that this was only 6 years after they had won the Champions League and 2 years following a league win. Now, Dortmund were roughly 200 million in the gutter, so this 1% didn't exactly save them, but the prevailing belief is that it at least postponed the lights being turned off. In situations as dire as the one that they were in, that means something. In 2005, Watzke put together a budget and overall strategy that saved the club. The naming rights of the stadium was sold. Westfalenstadion became Signal Iduna Park. All players took salary cuts, they adopted a very neat and efficient method of recruitment, and less than a decade later, they were crowned back-to-back Bundesliga champions and made a Champions League final, humiliating Real Madrid in the process. He's earned his place in the pantheon of great Dortmund figures, for sure. I only say all of this to give you further context on who this man was and why what I'm about to say for the rest of the video is so complicated. In early 2024, he announced his plans to officially step down from his position at the club at the end of 2025, ending a 20-year run as CEO. There's a lot of layers of bittersweetness to this because yes, he is responsible for a lot of the good that I just mentioned, but his stock has also been steadily on the decline for years. Further to that, a lot of people see this move as him leaving without a proper succession plan while the club is at its arguably most disjointed in his entire tenure as CEO. I mentioned that Dortmund have been consistently high earners in the realm of elite football over the last decade at least, but it's true. They do not hold a candle to the financial prowess of the big boys above them. Their buy low, sell high strategy was adopted for a reason, and believe you me, they are desperate to try and find ways to bridge the gap. But this is where things get a bit contentious, not just from a Dortmund perspective, but from a Bundesliga perspective. Money over traditional values. These are some quotes by Dortmund Managing Director of Finance Carsten Kramer in 2023. "We are still a football club and are not a marketing entity. We belong to the people. We don't belong to a government or a fund or a private equity company. We belong to 190,000 members. These are the strengths of our club. I have the duty to gain as much commercial revenue as possible, but I always have to care for the authenticity. That is sometimes a pity, the limit for growth. But I'm still proud to represent this club. From a purely commercial perspective, I would be happy to develop ideas like PSG have done, but that wouldn't be Dortmund." This is the kind of quote that many fans have come to resent because it's contradictory in nature. He proudly says we are not a marketing entity, but then he goes ahead and says it's a pity that he can't increase the commercial revenue of the club using practices that directly go against the essence of the Bundesliga of Borussia Dortmund. But we all know that it's only really a pity because he knows that the members wouldn't take to it. I'm pretty sure that there is an opinion behind closed doors that the members are holding them back in a way. Listen, you need to make money. This is a business. Football is a business, even before the big boom in revenue in the 90s that made everyone rich in this game, okay? Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But the point is, you can't preach authenticity when going directly against the values of your base. Everyone knows what you really want to do. In 2024, Dortmund partnered with massive arms dealer Rheinmetall, for example, which makes sense to me. I feel like having the idea of being armed when my team is losing is fantastic for society at large. That was sarcasm, but now I see that I missed the mark. In 2023, when private equity investment was being posed by the DFL for the Bundesliga to compete with the biggest European leagues, Dortmund were a staunch supporter of this. It's also worth noting that Hans-Joachim Watzke sits as the chairman of the DFL Supervisory Board. The deal would have seen 2 billion euros invested into the league by private equity firms such as Blackstone, Advent, and CVC. This would be in exchange for 12.5% of the broadcasting and sponsorship income the league brings in for the next 20 years. La Liga already have a very similar deal with CVC signed in 2021, whereby the share is 8.5% and the length of the deal is 50 years. The opinion here is that outside investors with a very clear mandate for maximizing profits as much as possible would negatively impact the interest of the common fan, match-going or otherwise, i.e. the reason why 50+1 exists in the first place, and the reason why people have access to the footballing experience regardless of their background in Germany. In the future, top fixtures could be played at 10:30 German time for the benefit of an American primetime audience, as is already the case in Spain, or even abroad if it helps open up new revenue streams for the investor. Spokesperson Klaus Schneider, speaking on behalf of Dortmund's many fan groups. Bundesliga fans revolted in protests and Dortmund fans led the charge. A 2/3 majority was required from all 36 Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2 clubs to approve the deal. That means they needed 24 out of 36 votes. 20 voted for, 11 against, 5 abstained. Motion rejected. When it comes to Dortmund, it seems that the belief is that the club is moving further and further away from the nature of relationship they once had with the support and the values they stood for, but at the same time, it also looks like internally they're desperately clinging on to the past. From reading articles and press releases and watching interviews, Watzke always refers to doing things the Dortmund way quite a lot. Not necessarily a bad thing, is it? Most clubs, successful, unsuccessful, they do things their way. But hold that thought for a second as we go down the organogram. Watzke's on his way out. But what about the rest of the gang? The succession plan, if you will. There's been a lot of shuffling around and creation of brand new roles and titles and just a general shift in responsibilities, but I'm only going to really speak on a handful of personalities, the public-facing ones. Most of Watzke's responsibilities, communication, finances, HR, have been spread out across the existing executives. However, in mid-2024, a new position was created, somebody at the very top that handles everything sport, a CEO of sport. You might hear me refer to that as Managing Director of Sport as well, but it's not to be confused with Sporting Director, which is a level below. So here are the main players. Lars Ricken, scorer of the wonder goal that sealed Dortmund's sole Champions League, was the youth coordinator and is now the new CEO of Sport. Sebastian Kehl, former captain of Dortmund during the prime Klopp years and current Sporting Director. He was the favorite for the CEO of Sport role. He didn't get it. Lots of articles during the round that say he and others within the organization weren't happy with this decision. Wherever the truth lies, I'm a firm believer that where there's smoke, there's fire. Matthias Sammer, another Champions League winner of the Ballon d'Or in 1997 while donning Dortmund colors, winner of the Bundesliga with Dortmund as a player and a manager. He later became the Bayern Munich sporting director and led them to a European treble in 2013. Beating Dortmund in the final on his way there. He's now an advisor to the board and a frequent critic of the team in the press. He's out of line, but he's right. And then we have Sven Mislintat, another person with a long history at the club and maybe the most unhinged person in the place. A chief scout between 2006 and 2017. Credited with being a big influence in signing Robert Lewandowski, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Shinji Kagawa, Ousmane Dembele, among many, many more. But he's reportedly never been too easy to work with. Thomas Tuchel, who many would say the same thing about, can attest to this. The two locked horns and Mislintat headed for the exit. He bounced from there to Arsenal and Ajax, and controversy followed him everywhere he went. He signed several players at a loss for each team and even started signing players that were represented by friends and companies he had direct connections with. He even got in the face of Ajax coach at the time, Maurice Steyn, when he didn't play Diant Ramaj, a goalkeeper that he signed, ahead of other options. He's gifted, but he's nuts. And right now, it seems like he's more nuts than gifted. So Dortmund did the sensible thing and rehired him in April 2024 as a squad planner in an advisory role with no say on the final decision to sign players. He's since made several unsanctioned TV appearances, approached players unbeknownst to Dortmund, and is accused of leaking sensitive information to the press. Worse yet, he supposedly won Sebastian Kehl's job as sporting director and has already had many of his ideas favored over those of Kehl since his return. There's a phenomenon known as standing too close to the elephant. It basically means you're so occupied or enamored by a certain subject that you give no consideration to the big picture. Edin Terzic, the manager before Şahin, was also a long-term Dortmund man. He started as a scout and youth coach, left, came back, and eventually became the manager. He is said to have recently left Dortmund by his own volition. Of course, he did fall out with some of the players, and there were rumors that he was losing faith in the backrooms at the club. Nonetheless, he often cited how emotionally attached he was to the club, being a boyhood fan, being an employee at the club for cumulatively a decade. He's been seen crying with the support after losses, being incredibly emotionally attached, which is a great thing, but perhaps he was too close to the elephant. One can only imagine this affected his ability to make those really ruthless decisions. One of the main critiques that Watzke and his board have received over the past couple of years is their unwillingness to try out new things in line with what some of the bigger clubs are doing. Hire new elite managers, ones that don't have Schwarz-Gelben in their past. And if they do, make sure they're qualified. Throw your hat in the ring for some of the best players out there. Express a desire to be the best. All of these points are contradictory to Watzke's own words. Again, going back to 2023 after Dortmund lost on the final day, in the new season, Watzke expressed happiness with Dortmund being on track to make 68 points by the end of the season. No team has won the Bundesliga with 68 points since Kaiserslautern did it in 1998. This will never happen again. They are clearly happy with second. And before anyone goes ahead and uses the money argument over here, Dortmund are not a poor club. Alright, Niklas Süle is on about 11 million euros a year. Serhou Guirassy, who just signed, is on about 9.8 to 10 million. And they've shown in the past that they are able to spend wisely and be innovative enough to beat some of the bigger clubs at their own game. And on that note, Dortmund are beginning to realize the problems at hand and how deep they go. But they're also prioritizing something that's letting their biggest selling point slip away: short-term joy over long-term success. Many players in their late 20s and 30s are arriving, and these players will not be sold for as much as they're being bought for. At the moment, Jamie Gittens is the only player under 23 that's been shining in this squad. Like Sancho, he came from Manchester City, he's 20 years old right now, and I don't think anybody is under any illusion that he will still be at the club in 2 to 3 years. Julian Duranville also fits into that category, but he's been struggling with hamstring problems all year. And finally, that brings us to Nuri Şahin. We don't have to have a discussion about Şahin. Nuri is not up for discussion. Rather, the players who have to question themselves. Strange thing to say about a coach that you would go on to fire about 8 days later. Lars Ricken said this of Şahin after the club's 4-2 loss to Holstein Kiel, a team that only has one Bundesliga season under their belt. This one. They will be relegated this year, but Dortmund were 3-0 down by halftime. I think there are very few realities in Doctor Strange's visions where this appointment was a success. Nuri Şahin, born in the area, a product of the Dortmund Academy and a long-time servant of the club, was the definition of a wunderkind. Debuted for the club at 16, the Bundesliga Player of the Year in 2010-11 as Dortmund won the league, and handed a big move to Real Madrid because of it. Things never really worked out at Real Madrid for him, nor anywhere else. Not like it did at Dortmund, at the very least. But he remained at the heart of the Schwarz-Gelben future, returning as a player on his way to eventually retiring at Antalyaspor in 2021. He gets 2 years of experience as the manager, then joins Edin Terzic's team as an assistant. Terzic leaves, and now he's made the manager at 36 years of age, the same age as Mats Hummels, who also left 13 months later, and he is no longer employed at the club. If you look at their basic stats on the Bundesliga website, you'll see that they're 14th in intensive runs, 11th in sprints, and 15th in distance covered. For a team that goes for a high-pressing, possession-based style, they don't run very much. That's a problem. They have fantastic players, but they don't look very committed to the cause, do they? Imagine seeing Klopp's heavy metal football, falling into a coma, and then waking up to this. It's tragic. The leadership seems absent, and funnily enough, Dortmund have quite a lot of players that fit into that experienced category where leadership is kind of expected. Emre Can, Pascal Gross, Sergio Guirassy, Julian Brandt, all 28 or older. All of them must shoulder some blame here. Was Şahin the problem? Or was it the people that put him in charge purely because it follows the Dortmund way? What's done is done, right? But if Dortmund want to salvage something in the very near future, their approach is going to have to be twofold. They need to win back the trust of the support, and they need to muster up the sense of initiative that propelled them to where they currently are in the first place. And based on the very recent past, it seems that simply rehiring the people that were there during those glory days isn't enough.